Hey guys, and welcome to the Original Strength BodCast. This week we have brought back my good friend and special guest, Miss Kelly Manzone, back to the show. And Kelly and I are going to be talking about the subject of intuitive training. But just to give you some background, we are in the age of the virus, where everyone is at Corona camp right now. And I'm saying that because the last time Kelly and I talked, this was nowhere in our minds. Uh, I mean, we both had big plans. We were doing some really fun things, but a lot has changed since then. Anyway, so this could be a very, very good conversation and timely, given the situation and everything that's going on around us. So Kelly, thank you very much and welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me back. I'm excited. It's going to be interesting, though.
This
Like the
is
energy is so different nowadays.
Yes, so a lot has changed since we last spoke. You were beginning or getting ready to start your world tour and
Yes.
do a lot of really awesome trainings with your club bells and all your circular training. But a lot of that, you actually got started, but you didn't make it to the full
Yeah,
world.
because Paul lives in Australia, so he worked backwards. He went from Australia to Hawaii, from Hawaii to California, and then met me in St. Louis. So it was kind of like within that 48 hours is when everything was really starting to go down. So I did fly on that Friday, the 12th, I think it was, down to St. Louis, and there was only 15 people on the plane. And I'm like, okay, this is really unfolding fast. So, we did our workshop and flew back on that Sunday night. And because I had been on a flight, our family took some precautions, and my husband and son stayed with my in-laws for a few days, which actually worked out in the sense that it allowed Paul and I to figure out what we were going to do, because we had to cancel 3 of our workshops. And we were monitoring everything closely, but it all kind of happened so fast. And because he's halfway around the world, it's a lot better for us to kind of figure everything out when we're in the same space and on the same time zone. So we basically planted ourselves. He had an Airbnb in Norwalk, and we filmed for 2 full days our manual during that time, and had to send out a lot of emails and coordinate with everybody, our hosts, everything, the airlines. that was a challenge. Um, so yeah, that was interesting. So we finally got him back to Australia. He left on last Friday, and had to sign a piece of paper. He's healthy, but he's in quarantine in Australia. They're locked down too. And everybody, I have to say, was really awesome. It was really emotional, and every attendee understood the circumstances that we have to reschedule. So we're working on finding a date when watching this closely in Paul's health too.
So this really has been an unusual, and it's a world event, but it has been very nice and inspirational to see the hearts of people, the understanding of people, and like it. Big events do bring people together, but you
Absolutely.
don't always expect to see the caring and the attention that comes forth sometimes, you know.
That's true. And I had to cancel 3 of my own workshops going forward into May and June. And everybody else, everybody's been super understanding. I think that for the majority of us that are in the industry, that this is our full-time career, we really understand the waves that the business brings us. And so I think everybody's been extra, supportive.
So when you got back from filming your manual with Paul, did you also self quarantine as well?
I was self-quarantined here at my house. And so because Paul was here and basically, we had the time and we had already been sharing an Airbnb in St. Louis together, we kind of quarantined at my house, and I would drop him off at his Airbnb, and we would film, and then we got outside to train quite a bit. But it was kind of short-lived, because we were watching the circumstances, and we really had to get him back to Australia. So I did, once he left, I did spend another couple days by myself before I picked up Leonardo from my in-laws, and my husband came home too.
So during that time, were you able to engage in any intuitive training for yourself?
At the time, not necessarily, because my focus was making sure that everything, all the loose ends that we could tie up with the workshop happened. So we went into filming, and it actually took quite a few hours to film. And then when we watched back day 2 of what we filmed, the camera lens was off. So we're like, no. So we had to refilm it, and it was so funny because like I love how like you could have a relationship with a colleague and a friend where like if something happens, you both just like you're like, okay, there's no point in getting upset. Let's just have a cup of coffee and start over. And so that's what it was like. We were like, okay, we're just gonna do this. And I didn't train much at all, and that affected me in the sense of like my energy, because I'm typically an anxious person by nature, and I could feel like that buildup. And then I realized that the circumstances are what they are, and it was most important to put the workshops in Paul's health and getting him home first, then reconnecting and getting my family settled, because my son now is not in school. So my intuitive training is coming into play because I fit in what I can. And sometimes that's like walking lunges to the bathroom, squats in the kitchen. Every time I run to the restroom, I'm like, all right, I'll do a couple of pull-ups. Because, right now the reality is I think I'm still in adjustment phase, much like you must be, because, well, you guys were behind us, right, with closing?
Yeah, well, everything was kind of like a domino effect. Started up, like it seemed to start either north or west, and then it
Mm-hmm.
very quickly came southeast.
Yeah. How long has the gym been closed?
We have been closed now I think almost a week today, actually.
Okay, got it. So in Connecticut, we're at like 2 weeks.
Okay.
So it's like I'm definitely missing the rowing machine, the Versa climber, the step mill, running. But I got out for a run the other day, and that was like probably the most enjoyable run I've had in a long time. And it was just because of like getting fresh air, getting out of the house, and being able to kind of absorb the beauty around me. And my son and I, because I think that's the task, because you got your kids at home, but I think they're a little bit older than Leonardo,
Yes.
is him being only in 4th grade and having probably like an hour to an hour and a half of actual schooling on the computer a day. And he's an only child. So I'm like, okay, we have to get outside, and I don't want him dependent on electronics. So the intuitive training is, if it's weather permits, we get out into the woods for a hike for about an hour. And then the afternoon, if he goes on a couple of phone calls with a friend, then if he's on these calls, we're going to go back outside for a second walk, and it's going to be somewhere in the vicinity of like 30 minutes to an hour. And we've been doing that every day that it's not raining. And it's been a real awesome experience for me to get that special time with him and to talk to him about like, sometimes the tough subjects of like he's missing his routine and not understanding why he can't have play dates. And, so it's allowing us to kind of open a dialogue. And I find when you get out of the home and get into nature, the dialogue flows a lot easier.
All right, so that's before we get into the out into the nature part, can you can you explain intuitive training for everyone?
So in the normal circumstances that are not the coronavirus, I would say for myself, I realized that once I was battling colitis, we discussed that a little bit on the last podcast, but just for those of you that didn't watch, several years ago, I got extreme food poisoning from a salad it was the year that spinach and cantaloupe were both in the news for listeria and salmonella. And I had a salad that had both spinach and cantaloupe, and that was on a Monday. I was so sick by that Sunday, I had to crawl to my neighbors because I was home alone, and I practically fainted in their doorway, and I was
Oh,
hospitalized twice. And then I was put on antibiotics for 6 months, which completely killed my system, and I had infectious colitis that I battled for almost the better part of 3 years. And I was, during that time, my husband's family business closed, and I literally had to become the full-time breadwinner. and I was pushed to the limit. Um, and while I was slowly healing, it was basically just time. You know, I spent thousands of dollars on alternative medicine and meditation and acupuncture and every kind of supplement and all that, but my body just mainly needed time. That's when intuitive training kicked in, and how my Instagram started was I realized that in order to heal myself, I wanted to train at home and be amongst my many toys that I've been collecting for the better part of 17 years. And so being now in my 40s and versus like, you know, and this was in my late 30s, my 20s was all, I think you and I talked about this before. It's like, go all in, go hard, you know, more is better. And then in my 30s, it was mainly like brought on motherhood. It brought on the illness and kind of exploring the unconventional tools that I've really enjoyed for the better part of over a decade, but going deeper into skill-based modalities. The intuitive training came from the fact that I realized, like, as I was healing, that I didn't want my fitness or my routine to occupy most of my mind space, because those of us that have been in the industry for a really long time know our colleagues or clients that really battle with like either orthorexia, you know, going to the extreme of too healthy or restriction and stuff like that. Since I had been so sick and I thought that I was not going to like really survive, I became more intuitive with how my body was feeling. So like instead of like being and this happens with friends of mine and colleagues too, who like follow a program to the T, and their program, like they will sacrifice their own health just to stick to a certain program. And then there's times when that obviously makes sense if you're preparing for a competition and, you know, like, and there's times when that works against you. And I realized that I've been so sick and I wanted to come back stronger. And I believe in many ways I'm stronger now than I was before I got sick. But a lot of it has to do with being intuitive and kind of tuning into, am I rested enough? You know, am I, you know, caring for other aspects of my life more? You know, so it's kind of like got a lot of layers, like an onion. You know, I think intuitive training also shows where you are in your experience in within the business. It shows where your knowledge could be, and how you can also relate more to like your clients too. Because I think sometimes, you know, I run into people who will take my classes and they do like 3 classes a day, right? All the time, but they're broken, right? So if they're not addressing what's happening to them mentally, then they're always going to be on this cycle of overdoing it, getting hurt. And you and I talked about the emotional aspects and the physical aspects, how they need to kind of coincide in order to kind of be successful. So that's a part of intuitive training. So if you're well mentally and you're well physically, intuitive training becomes a way to really kind of like succeed, in my opinion. But if something is lacking on either end, then you kind of fall into a vicious cycle, possibly.
So what I was hearing you say,
Yeah.
maybe, is that intuitive training is one, it can be a form of self-care,
Yes.
that can invite actual healing into your body, and it can do so because you're giving yourself space to honor your body, where it's at, how it feels, and the rest of everything that's going around you. Is that kind of close?
Yes.
Awesome. How does, in today's new world that we're in, with our with everyone mostly everybody's now being asked to stay at home or mandated to stay at home, how does intuitive training fit with where a person has to, their routine is out, their normal is gone, and now they do find themselves at home with their family, in just a totally different environment? Because I know movement is still so important, because to me that is the therapy. So how
Yes.
can intuitive training play a part in today's current situation?
I think being realistic, you know, and also being forgiving. like for yourself and for the people around you, because obviously it's a time where you're stressed out, or even if you're not feeling the stress like per se, it's kind of in your subconscious. So this is not normal, so everything is kind of being uprooted. And what I have found, especially since Paul and I parted ways, and now I have Leonardo home, and I'm homeschooling, and I'm used to being out of the house by 5:15 most mornings. And now it's like I woke up at like 7 o'clock this morning, and I was like, what just happened? And in my mind, I was like, all right, I'll get up at 6 o'clock before my boys wake up, and I'll get my workout in before Johnny leaves and before you and I get on the podcast. And that did not happen. So, my plan today is to, once we're wrapped up and I get Leo fed, I'm going to probably do a little something in my room here and then head outside. It's going to be nowhere near my normal. And I think it's okay for everybody to kind of not be in their usual right now and to fit in what they can. So it doesn't have to be like an hour. It doesn't have to be something that's grueling. But what I actually did yesterday, and I thought of you, was I did 10 minutes of sandbag get-ups last night while I was cooking dinner. I set everything up. I put my timer. I was like, Alexa, set the timer for 10 minutes. And I grabbed my 35-pound sandbag, and I only was nasal breathing. And I did 5 minutes of get-ups on each side. My heart rate was definitely accelerated by the end of those 10 minutes. And that's what I fit in. So I think it's like if you could take the little moments that you have and even like get the kids outside going for a hike like I am with Leo, if that's possible. If not, maybe just a few minutes of fresh air. But like Leo and I were talking about like, revisiting old skills. So like, Leo used to like basketball. We've got a basketball hoop on our porch. So I'm going to pull that outside today for him and I to like play together. So I think there's ways to be creative. There's ways to maybe be a little bit more disciplined if you need it. But I think it's a time where we're only a week and a half in, or for most places, to be kind to yourself and to, allow yourself little movement breaks throughout the day if you could fit them in.
So me personally, where I'm at, my intuition has led me almost every day to go take a walk. And like I might take a walk for an hour and and it is very helpful and soothing for my soul. One, it gets me moving, but walking helps the brain, and it connects the brain, and it helps you calm your thoughts. But fortunately right now it's also springtime here, and everything just looks so amazing.
Yeah.
So
beautiful.
So what's really wild is while I'm walking in the midst of all this chaos and stuff we're going on, and just trying to weigh it all out in your head and trying not to weigh it out too deep and think too far into the future. Exactly. But then all of a sudden, still seeing like amazing, just the bluest birds and the greenest grass and the sky. And I mean, it's just, so even in the midst of all of that chaos and just uncertainty, there's still beauty. And that has been my therapy almost every day, is just getting out in that.
Same here. And it we didn't even realize I passed this trail entry for a long time, and I didn't think ever to go down it because we always go to Lake Mohegan, but they closed Lake Mohegan. So we've been walking it every single day. And like the other day we saw a woodpecker, and we're like, oh my, like all of a sudden Leo and I are like stopping and like observing and taking a different trail, going a different route. And I'm like, holy smokes, I don't think I normally realize how beautiful it is. So there's like this silver lining, right? And I think it's also allowing us to kind of, when we've experienced that and we're getting outside, we're managing everything. We're getting that much needed vitamin D, because we go into 3 days of rain coming up, and I'm like, oh, no. But, it's definitely, I feel like recharged, and I feel like more of certainty, like, okay, got this, like after I get out, I'm back from a walk.
No, yeah. So yes, the silver lining is, thank you, coronavirus, because now I see things differently, or things I just would always take for granted or have taken for granted.
Yeah. No, I know. It's weird. It's true.
So in intuitive training, that can lead to, I mean, because there are different seasons in life, like you talked about, how things were in your 20s and in your 30s and your 40s. So I would say now to me, the 40s for training are the mature phase of training where you kind of, your values change, or
Absolutely.
you have better vision on what's important for your life. Not that the other stuff when you're 20s you were blind to anything. It's just that we go through these seasons where we just esteem some things more valuable than others. Um,
Absolutely.
like in my 40s, I esteem being able to move around in my 60s the high prize. You
That's
know,
what I always think about. It's what you do in this decade that sets you up for the quality of life in the next decade. And that's how
yes.
I think of things. But I think our industry is always driven towards turning back the clock. And no matter what, nobody is turning back. We always have to think ahead. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I think with fitness is. Like I'll have like women who will, follow somebody on, Instagram that's got millions of followers, but she's 23 years old and this woman's 55, and she thinks that there's a conception that if I train like that, I'll look like that, I'll go back and be like that. And there's a missing conversation about what you do now. You have to think of your future. The clock is only moving forward. So if we're fixating on that and our mind space is going there, then we're not preparing for what's to come or enjoying what we currently have.
Right. Yeah. So, and I'm of the mind, well, and just the way I think, like I think the more gentler, reasonable approach will actually preserve your body better, which is kind of like turning back the clock, but it's just,
Yeah.
or even help your body heal. So if the body can heal because you're honoring it and not demanding from it or punishing it, so if you allow it to heal, that's kind of like turning back the clock a little bit, but it does set you up for that longevity where you're not worn out and broken 30 years from now, 40 years from now.
Exactly. Like, I mean, now that, especially the past few times I've been down at OSI and observed you training or taking class in the way that you guys run things, that is the perfect explanation. Like, what you do is actually extremely challenging, but it's like I've on the last podcast when I talked about OS, it's intelligent fitness. So it's like, it's like, for example, even just the 10 minutes of get ups yesterday, before OS, I never really thought of doing like 10 minutes for get ups. It was always like the few times that I competed in kettlebell sport, it was like last those 10 minutes in sport. So it's always training that high volume overhead jerks and thinking about volume versus thinking about kind of like moving well and being like kinder to my body and training and obviously and getting out of just that high volume overhead position, which my body likes to move in all planes of motion. It is not like being fixed.
Right.
Yeah.
So because of the different seasons and where intuitive training plays a part in as mature training, I guess, how how do you get to the point where, and this is going to be, I guess, individually specific, but how does a person understand like how much is enough or when it's enough? Like, when they're doing the right amount or they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck, and or wherever they are is good, it's okay, it's good, it's good to be there.
I think it's complex, right? Because humans are complex by nature, and you have an array of personalities, disciplines, um, goals. Like everybody's goal is different, and I think it is becoming more in connected and intuitive and listening to the underlying cues that your body gives you. Because I know so many people that ignore what their body is telling them. But if you're kind of listening to what your body is letting you know, like, for example, I have a friend of mine locally who wants to do a marathon but hasn't really trained well or prepared for it or done any cross training and is constantly running in pain with the goal of like just reaching that half marathon. But I'm like, if the half marathon, even if it happens, in several months, I don't even know if it's still going to be on locally. If you're running in pain now, 2 months out, what kind of condition are you going to be in the day of the race? So it's kind of like, I think there's a lot of, personal responsibility for yourself. And I don't understand the concept of if something is off and doesn't feel well or is injured to keep pressing through. Like, and so many people do that. So that's one, is injury prevention or listening to what's happening. Two, it's like if it's affecting you mentally, like if your mental mind space is getting consumed by your training, that's a problem. You know, like your mind space needs to be spread out amongst, your occupation, your family, your friends. And if your energy is getting tainted by your training, it's kind of counterproductive.
So I'm gonna try to. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm gonna try to segue and shift gears at the same time. So, intuitive. If we're training intuitively and we're honoring our body and we're listening to it and we're taking our cues from it, and then we move accordingly so that it feels good, then there's the chicken and the egg. If it
Right.
feels good mentally, you're gonna feel good, and if you feel good mentally, your body's gonna feel better. But sometimes we don't know how to necessarily honor those cues, or we are just so disconnected from our body.
Exactly.
Excuse me, we just don't know what the hell's going on, right? So, and I guess here's my segue to that is how important is, because I think there's a great deal of people that don't understand the value of strength or mobility, and both of those two things existing together inside of the foot. How important is foot health when it comes to
Good
whole
segue.
whole health? I was working really hard. It's been so hard to think lately. Uh, I'm sweating over here now. So, but how important is foot health when it comes to overall health, and mental well-being in a person? Because it does matter. It does play a role.
Um, so yes, and this is going to be related to the previous podcast when I touched upon that for a second, and then we got the the comment on the YouTube. The reason I am personally always drawn to foot and hand health is because growing up, my mom has severe arthritis. She's debilitated from head to toe, just had a knee replacement, needs another knee replacement, needs both of her feet done. And my mom has a claw hand. She literally can't spread her fingers. It's like this. So her issues with her feet began when she was in her 30s. My mom was very young when she had me. She was only 20. So I have distinct memories of when I was a teenager and my mom was, younger than I am now, and she was in severe pain and having foot issues. And unfortunately, she didn't get the surgeries that she should have gotten. So as a young athlete, I was always drawn to the importance of foot health, because I witnessed firsthand what happens if your feet aren't healthy. If your feet aren't healthy, your ankles go, you have issues with your knees, your hips, as we all know, then everything is connected. And at that same time, further on, well, not at that exact same time, but when I moved back from Orlando when I was in my early 20s, I took care of my grandmother on my father's side for about a year and a half before she passed away, before her 92nd birthday. And she was head to toe arthritis, tiny little thing. But I used to have to put morphine patches on her because her spine was literally crumbling. And she couldn't pick up anything with her hands. So, I remember my grandmother, like, she would think I was like so strong for picking up like a quart of milk. Oh my God, you're so strong. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my grandmother was such this, like, and here I am just doing a daily task, right? The daily task of taking a milk carton out. But her hands wouldn't allow her to grip. And as I got into the industry, and I think we talked about this on the first podcast, that I never really felt like I fit in, because I was always like, there's something more. Why are we sitting people down? Why aren't we talking about grip, for women? It was always the studies were on men for grip health in their heart. And then foot health, really, I don't think it's always been important and talked about, but now I think more with the power of media, people are discussing it more. Like, I love the Foot Collective. Dr. Emily, I went to the Barefoot Strong Summit, and that was incredible. And, I have a few books on it. And I've realized that watching the women in my family suffer, I don't want to suffer that way. I want to see if I could offset some of the genetic stuff that I'm maybe predisposed to. So far, so good. And I want my clients to kind of take their shoes off, reconnect to their feet, because, you get most people in this area commute to Manhattan. And for fitness, it's typically, which there's nothing wrong with, we talked about this before, going to an Orange Theory class or getting on a Soul Cycle bike or whatever. But are you really kind of addressing what you need these and you need your feet as you get older? So, it's important to make sure that they're viable for the quality of your health in the long run.
So what you're saying is your feet are the hands of your legs, and and to, but okay, so and I don't know. Some people might not understand that if your foot or if your feet are healthy, chances are your ankles are more mobile, your knees are healthy, your hips are going to be
Exactly.
healthy, and even your shoulders are going to be healthier if you have healthy feet because of the kinetic chain, and the first thing in contact with the ground is our foot. So how since you esteem the hands of the legs so well, how do you keep your feet healthy? Like, what are some things people can do to start to regain the strength and health of their feet?
I personally do some foot exercises. So Dr. Emily has an awesome website. I think it's EB. Oh gosh, I should know this. Evidence based EBDA. I have I'll get it for you. I can't even think straight.
Don't
It'll
fret,
come back
folks.
to
We'll
me in a
put that
second.
URL in the comment section.
The Foot Collective is obviously an awesome resource. I have one of their beams. And I pretty much for the most part train barefoot, probably 90% of the time. I do wear toe spreaders that I have from Correct Toes and then from the Foot Collective. I go through periods of time where I'll wear them like every night and just sleep with them on. They don't seem to bother me. I wear wide toe box sneakers for the most part if I am in footwear. I like to do like balancing drills with my feet. I have the sand dune stepper, so I do some exercises on that. And I've also had my tennis group on the sand dune stepper, or those that have bunions and can't quite articulate their feet like they used to. It's a perfect tool for that.
You mentioned last time a rock mat. What is a rock mat?
Oh, the rock mat, it's kind of like, so it's on, we have it at the gym. And so obviously, like, not every area is rural and able to kind of step out and go onto stones during the day, so it's basically just like regular black mat, but it has like little stones kind of like made into it so that it mimics kind of being outdoor on rocks. Like over the summer whenever we go to Maine, I always walk on the beach, but where all the rocks are, and people think I'm crazy. I think it's like a foot massage, and I do that as much as I can. We did that at the WMC too. We just kind of put your feet up.
Is that what it does? Is it really a foot massage, or is there something more to it?
No, it's mainly to kind of mimic walking on stones. So it's not exactly for a foot massage, but it's for like giving texture. Because like we're so disconnected from our feet all the time if we're on in like work shoes or dress shoes. And then we're, walking on pavement all the time. So it's just to give it some texture.
I think the last time I talked to you, you had just gotten an acupressure mat or something like that.
Yeah, it's right here.
Have you walked on that barefooted?
Yeah, it hurts, but not bad. Like now I'm used to it. Like the first time I was like, okay, that's different than the rock mat or the actual stones. But I like it though, and I'll just lay on there and kind of because I got the neck pillow too.
So a story you don't know, because you showed me that, I had one of those just laying around the house, and you were talking about foot health, and I was just looking at it, and I was like, well, I wonder what that feels like. So I spent like an afternoon just walking on it and stuff, and then I decided to buy like 2 or 3 of them so that I could string them across my room and actually walk from one to the other, because I'm crazy like that. But it was very interesting. I will say that the foot feels so alive.
Yes.
Now, if you're at home and you don't know what I'm talking about, if you Google acupressure mat, it's like standing on a cactus. All these little prickly needles that anyway, that's it right there.
Yeah, and then here's the pillow.
Yeah, the pillow.
It's like
So what the pillow is good for is actually putting the arch of your foot on and just
oh, that's a good idea.
oh man, so it lights you up like a Christmas tree. So yeah, I like to play. It's intuitive playing, really. It's not training, but yeah, my foot felt so alive. I could feel everything a couple of hours after that. It was just really neat. It was a really neat experience.
I have the mat that Dr. Emily makes, and the Nabasu mat. That's kind of similar. It's for like it's evidence-based technology about kind of connecting to the 200,000 receptors that are in your feet. It's not as, this is obviously something that's no denying, like that's like you're really going to get the feedback from there. It's a bit softer, but it also kind of makes you feel alive after you've been on it. It's pretty cool.
So are there really almost 200,000 receptors in the bottom of the feet?
Yeah, that's what I remember from the Barefoot Strong Summit. I really I hope I could go again this year. I went for 2 years. I wasn't able to go last year.
That's amazing. So that alone is reason enough to spend time barefooted, so that you can stimulate those receptors, which really in turn stimulates the entire body, reflexively, vestibular system balance, neuromuscular contractions, reactions, all of that stuff.
Absolutely. And I had somebody the other day like comment, on one of my videos, because he obviously like I prefer kettlebells being barefoot, and they're like, I would never do that barefoot. But if you're wearing like a regular Nike sneaker, like that, or sneakers that aren't minimalist, like, and you're trying to do bell work, the sneakers disconnect you from really kind of that feedback from the ground. And the sneaker, if you don't have experience, is going to make you rock back and forth. You remove the sneakers and then you get barefoot on the ground, and your kettlebell technique instantly improved.
So I attended one of those schools that we had talked about before for kettlebells.
Yeah.
And some people listening will get this and others won't, but it still makes sense. The phrase was, comrades, quick feet or happy feet. So if you train barefooted, even if, the truth is even if you train with shoes on, if you drop a kettlebell on your foot, gonna hurt either way.
Yeah.
It's still a messed up foot. So it's really not even worth the argument over.
I mean, it's kind of hard to drop a bell right on your foot, because like if it's in a swing and you release up there, it's going to go away from you. And a clean, you're cleaning, snatch should be a good snatch. I don't know.
So since we're talking about foot health and kettlebells now, so the other thing for kettlebell safety was situational awareness.
Absolutely.
And it turns out if you are not actually aware of where your kettlebells are on the floor and you're walking by them and you don't give yourself adequate space, you can break a toe. I know a guy that did that, and he's probably talking to you right now. So Kelly, are you got any projects you're working on now that you have all this free time?
Well, wearing our shirts that Danny and I designed for Clubs Flow and Rock and Roll. So working on that. And then Paul and I, since we filmed the manual, that's going to be going out. And then we're also doing a second manual. So he's going to film from Australia. I'll film from my living room. And then both of those are going to be available for purchase in the upcoming weeks. And since I had to cancel my Pillars of Female Strength workshops, I might try to figure out a way to do it in a webinar format or something. Like, I don't know. It's funny because, like, this week, with everything kind of being in upheaval, I have to kind of push forward some projects that were in my mind. And then, I don't know. I'm kind of in that in-between phase trying to figure it out. But I'm going to do Fix Your Swing. So before like the apocalypse happened, I was already going to do Fix Your Swing in April. So that's for people like if they are self-taught and they've had kettlebells for a long time and don't know how to quite swing well, it'd be Fix Your Swing for that. Or if people are self-taught with mace in Indian clubs, but primarily mace, they would kind of get some instructions. So what they would do is they would send me videos of their swinging so I could kind of make an assessment. Like, is it something that's structurally inhibiting their movement? Or if it's just like a technique, like if they haven't just been taught the right way to execute the initial cast or the pull to the front rack position and create that smooth pendulum. So I'm going to move that up.
So if somebody's looking to fix their swing or enhance their circular training, how can they stay on top of what you've got, what you're offering, or how can they get in touch with you?
So obviously Instagram, it's KelsBells88, but they could email me, which is Kelly, Kelly, at kmmoves.com. So Kelly at kmmoves.com. I obviously have a website that I never use that's really outdated. So I'm actually going to work on trying to start from scratch and build a new website. That's kind of needed at this point. I'm way behind on stuff. There's one thing that I'm really learning during all this is that I really need to start getting more tech savvy.
I think we're all learning a similar,
You're
especially
pretty tech savvy though.
You know what? There's so much I don't know. Like I know enough to get by mediocrely. Like is that even a word? I can mediocrely. Yeah, I'm very below average on tech, but
But you
I'm
guys
going
have
to
a good system though. I'm always like watching what you and Danny do, and I'm like, man, they're just so pulled together. How did they do it?
The secret is if you try to make people smile or laugh, they'll forgive you for many errors. But anyway, so all right. So, well, the cool thing is you're extremely creative and talented. So I know that you're going to come out because that's what eagles do. Eagles fly. So I know you're just going to come out of this soaring. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for being on the show again on the podcast. Really, it's always fun talking to you. And guys, thank you so much for listening to Miss Kelly Manzone.
We hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Original Strength Podcast. If you made it this far, thank you so much.